Hi, I'm Jennifer. At 34, I found myself comfortably married to Jake for a year, spending most of my days teaching students online from our lovely, spacious home, a home that came into my possession after my parents passed. Life had a pleasant, predictable rhythm, that is, until it suddenly didn't. Jake and I live in this beautiful house, big and cozy, just perfect for the two of us. It was all ideal until recently, when Jake's parents, Martha and Bob, who lived just down the road, started dropping by more often. Initially, their visits were a welcome addition to our daily life, but the charm quickly wore off as Martha, armed with her lifetime of housewifery experience, began critiquing every little detail of how I managed our home. Her complaints were endless, from the flavor of my pasta, which apparently was as bland as cardboard, to my housekeeping skills, which apparently didn't meet her high standards. "Jennifer, darling, this pasta is a bit bland, don't you think?" she'd comment with a grimace, as if the food was barely edible. And as for the housekeeping, she was relentless. "A woman's touch means a spotless home," she'd preach, implying that my efforts were insufficient to keep Jake happy. "You do want to keep Jake happy, don't you?" she'd needle. I tried to hold my ground, explaining that between my online teaching commitments, I simply couldn't dedicate every moment to household chores. "Martha, I work. It's not like I can magic the dust away between classes," I once argued, hoping for just a hint of understanding. But she dismissed my words with a wave of her hand, as if they were mere annoyances. "Nonsense. It's about prioritizing. Your job is to take care of the home and Jake, of course." Her criticisms even extended to Jake's laundry, inspecting his clothes in front of me as if conducting a military inspection. "You're letting him wear this? The colors have faded. You're not using the right detergent," she accused, as if I had committed a grave sin. I remember clenching my fists, so tight that I thought I might actually be capable of turning coal into diamonds, yet I swallowed my anger for the sake of peace, reminding myself, they're not staying with us, it's just a visit. But the reality of those visits soon changed dramatically. One sunny afternoon, as I was setting up for my next online session, I heard the unmistakable sound of a moving truck outside. Curious, I peeked through the window, only for my heart to sink at the sight. Jake was there, helping his parents unload boxes and furniture, lots of it. This was no visit, this was a move. Martha, ever the matriarch, took charge, directing the relocation efforts as if she were the queen of a vast empire, while Bob seemed utterly content, barely lifting a finger, basking in the glory of his new domain. Jake caught my eye from outside and offered a helpless, apologetic shrug. Furious, I stormed outside, confronting Jake. "What on earth is going on?" I demanded. "Oh, hey babe, surprise. Mom and Dad are moving in with us." "Isn't that great?" he said, his voice a mixture of enthusiasm and nervousness, clearly unaware of the storm brewing inside me. He was all smiles, completely oblivious to the nuclear level of my panic and anger. "Great? Great what? When were you planning on asking me, your wife, about this life-altering decision?" Each word I spat out was laced with incredulity. "Babe, calm down. It's just for a little while. They're having some financial troubles, and this way they can rent out their place for extra cash. It's a win-win," Jake tried to reason, attempting to wrap his arm around me. But I pulled away, not ready to be placated. At that moment, Martha chose to waltz over, a commanding figure in her pastel cardigan and pearls. "Jennifer, darling, it's so sensible, don't you think? We're all family here. Plus, you've got so much space in this lovely house of yours. It was meant to be shared." Shared? This house was my sanctuary, left to me by my parents who are no longer with us. It wasn't just some communal flop house. I tried to keep my cool, but my voice betrayed my simmering anger. "Martha, with all due respect, this is my house. Don't you think this is something that should have been discussed?" "Oh, sweetheart, don't be like that. You know, family helps family. We'll make such lovely memories together," Martha responded, practically patting herself on the back, while Bob nodded in agreement, adding his 2 cents. "Yeah, Jennifer, It's about time we all got closer, don't you think? Closer? The arrogance, the entitlement, it was all too much. Jake, caught between me and his parents, looked like a deer in headlights. Come on, Jenny, it'll be fine. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is ours, right? Wrong. So very wrong. But as angry as I was, I couldn't bring myself to kick them out on the spot. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was that tiny voice in my head reminding me what family meant to Jake. So, I did what I had become an expert at. I swallowed my fury, plastered on a smile, and welcomed them into my home. As the days turned into weeks, I realized this temporary arrangement was anything but. Martha and Bob made themselves right at home, critiquing my cooking, commenting on my lax cleaning habits, and generally making my life a living nightmare. Jake, meanwhile, was either at work or playing the role of the oblivious husband too well. The temporary situation started to feel like a life sentence. Every day, from the moment I cracked my eyes open to the second I collapsed into bed, was a marathon of trying to juggle work and the incessant demands of my new housemates. One morning, as I was prepping for a particularly important tutoring session, Martha barged into my makeshift office, her frown already etched deep into her face. Jennifer, this place is a pigsty. When was the last time you dusted? And those cups from yesterday are still in the sink. I clenched my jaw, my fingers pausing above the keyboard. Martha, I've got back-to-back sessions today. I'll get to it when I can, I managed to say, trying to keep my cool. She huffed, crossing her arms. In my day, we kept a clean house and worked. It's about managing your time better. Managing my time better? I wanted to scream. Instead, I bit back the harsh words and focused on the computer screen, though I could barely see it through the red haze of my anger. Bob wasn't any easier to deal with. He had this uncanny ability to need something right when I was in the middle of explaining complex concepts to my students. Jennifer, where's lunch? I'm starving here, he bellowed from the living room, oblivious to the do not disturb sign I'd hung on my door. It's in the fridge, Bob. Just warm it up, I'd reply, my voice strained with the effort to remain polite. What do I look like, a chef? Can't you take a break and fix something? He'd shoot back, his voice booming through the thin walls. Jake, bless him, tried to be the peacemaker, but his efforts usually amounted to little more than added frustration. Jenny, can't you just drop it for today? Let's have a quiet dinner, he'd say, trying to smooth over the latest flare-up. Drop it? As if I was the one stirring up drama over lunch and dust bunnies. The pinnacle of this daily grind came one evening when I was trying to wrap up my sessions for the day. Martha decided it was the perfect time to lecture me on the importance of a tidy home, again. You know, Jennifer, a cluttered house is a sign of a cluttered mind. Maybe if you tidied up more, you'd be less stressed. Less stressed? I almost laughed. Instead, I stood up, facing her square on. Martha, I'm working. This cluttered office is paying our bills right now. And maybe if you're so concerned about the cleaning, you could help out. Her face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. I am a guest in this house, Jennifer. It's not my job to clean. Guest, the word echoed mockingly in my mind. Some guest they were, turning my life and home upside down. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but think about the absurdity of it all. Here I was, in my own home, feeling more like an intruder than a hostess. As the shadows danced across the ceiling, the weight of the situation settled deep in my chest. I was but trusting my hump to provide, to teach, and to keep some semblance of peace in my own home, only to be criticized at every turn. Jake's soft snoring next to me was the only sound in the dark room. I turned to look at him, wondering how we ended up here. How did we go from newlyweds excited about our future to roommates, barely speaking, because his parents were driving a wedge between us? 3 months into what felt like the world's longest invasion of privacy, Jake came home early one day, looking like he'd just lost a fight with a bear. Jenny, I got fired, he blurted out, not even waiting to sit down. His folks were out, probably terrorizing some other poor soul with their presence, and he made me swear not to spill the beans to them. Great, just what I needed. Now it was all on me. My online tutoring gigs were suddenly not just about keeping busy or funding a few extra comforts, they were our lifeline. I doubled down on work, stretching my days thin. Before I knew it, I was not just tutoring, I was running my own online school. A small part of me buzzed with pride, but I kept it under wraps, no need to add fuel to the already blazing inferno that was our household dynamics. Money was tight, tighter than a lid on a jar that's been sealed for a century. Every penny had to scream for mercy before being spent. It got to the point where I had to have the talk with Martha and Bob. Look, I know this is awkward, but I need help with the bills. Maybe you could cover half the rent? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Their reaction was as if I'd suggested they fly to the moon. What do you mean? Jake's got it covered. He makes plenty, Bob scoffed, waving off my request like a bad smell. Yeah, about that, I started, but Jake's pleading look stopped me. He wasn't ready for them to know. He pulled me aside later, whispering, just a little longer, Jenny. I'll find something soon, I promise. Promises, right? Meanwhile, I was teaching, cooking, cleaning, and playing referee, all while trying to smile through gritted teeth. And Martha and Bob? They seemed to have turned complaining into an Olympic sport, barging into my office mid-lesson to demand attention as if I was hosting afternoon tea instead of running a business. Jennifer, this is unacceptable. You're always locked away in here. When are you going to make time for us? Martha demanded one day, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, while I was in the middle of explaining algebra to a 15-year-old. Martha's interruption was the final straw. This isn't afternoon tea, Martha, this is my job, I retorted, my patience finally breaking. The room tensed as I faced off with her, the lines clearly drawn. I'm working, can this wait? I hissed, trying to keep my voice down. No, it can't. We're family, and you're neglecting us, she shot back, oblivious to the irony. Bob wasn't any better. When's dinner? We're starving here, and you're just sitting around, he grumbled on a different occasion, ignoring the stack of papers and open textbooks around me. Sitting around, really, Bob? I'm teaching, and dinner is when you make it, I snapped, my patience fraying like an old rope. Jake was apologetic, always whispering thanks for holding us together. Jenny, it'll get better, he'd say, but better seemed like a distant land, one we weren't getting any closer to. And as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could keep this up. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Martha whipped out a glossy travel brochure, her eyes gleaming. Look at this, dear, she said, sliding the booklet across the table to me. We're thinking of a little getaway. A vacation. What do you think, a scarf or a shell as a souvenir? Before I could even process the absurdity of her question, she dropped another bomb. And darling, if you could spare $2,000 for us, that would be just peachy. Just for some pocket money, you know. I stared at her, dumbfounded. My fork clattered to my plate, my appetite gone. Spare $2,000? I echoed, incredulous. For a vacation? Bob nodded as if it was the most reasonable request in the world. Yeah, you know, for the little extras. Wouldn't want to miss out on the fun stuff. The room spun. This was beyond outrageous. It was as if they were living in a fantasy world where money grew on trees, and I was the gardener. I couldn't hold back any longer. How long do you plan to live at my expense? I demanded, my voice rising. You don't pay for anything, no rent, no groceries, and now you want me to fund your holidays, too? Martha and Bob exchanged glances, clearly not expecting the outburst. Well, we thought Jake was taking care of all that, Bob said, attempting to sound innocent. I turned to Jake, my eyes blazing. And what about you? Do you think this is okay? Jake squirmed in his seat, mumbling something inaudible. Not only that, I continued, steamrolling ahead, you barge into my office, interrupt my work, and have zero respect for my personal space. I've had it. There was a tense silence, then Jake, his face a mask of frustration, finally spoke up. Why are you talking to my parents like that? They're just trying to enjoy life, Jake retorted, his tone defensive. Enjoy life on my hard-earned money? I shot back, disbelief lacing my words. That's when Martha, always the actress, began her performance. Tears welled up as she wailed about my ingratitude. After all we've done for you. We even told Jake he shouldn't divorce you, despite everything. The room froze. Divorce? I echoed, the word slicing through the tension. I turned to Jake, my heart in my throat. Is that true? Jake's face went from red to white, a guilty look flashing in his eyes, before he averted his gaze. Martha, seizing the moment, clutched at her chest, gasping dramatically, my pills, upstairs, please. Despite everything, concern washed over me. I stood up abruptly, the need to ensure she was okay momentarily overshadowing my anger. Fine, I'll get your medicine. I left the dining room in a daze, my mind racing with the accusations, the deceit, and now this talk of divorce. My world was unraveling thread by thread, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I had barely reached the top of the stairs when I realized I didn't even know which medicine Martha was on about. Turning back, the last thing I expected was to overhear the truth that would turn my world upside down. Jake's voice, usually so warm and familiar, was barely a whisper, yet every word struck like a hammer. Mom, you nearly blew it tonight. We need to get her to sell the house first. Talking about divorce now is just going to spook her. My heart stopped. Divorce? Sell my house? The pieces clicked together in a mosaic of betrayal. His mom, Martha, was quick to reply, her voice a hiss. I know, but keeping up this charade is exhausting. She's not as clueless as you think. Jake was insistent, almost desperate. Just stick to the plan. Make things hard for her, unbearable even. She'll cave, sell the house to get away from you, and then we can do whatever. But not before. If she divorces me now, I get nothing from the sale. The coldness in his voice, the calculated manipulation, it was all laid bare. My knees felt weak, my heart shattered. This was their plan, my husband and his parents plotting against me in my own home. He continued, oblivious to my silent presence. We'll be set once this is done. Sell the old place too, and we can finally get something better. Just lay off the big purchases for now, don't draw attention. I stood there, frozen, a statue of disbelief and hurt. They were supposed to be my family. How could they do this? Back at the dining room door, I paused, collecting myself. The mask of ignorance was now my best defense. Walking in, I found Martha clutching her chest, a perfect picture of distress. Oh dear, I forgot to ask which medicine you needed, I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos within. Martha, caught in her act, quickly shifted gears. Oh, it's all right, dear. I think I just need a moment. The excitement of the evening, you know. Jake glanced at me, a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it guilt, fear? I couldn't tell. Everything okay, Jenny? I met his gaze, a hollow laugh echoing inside me. Fine, just tired, I guess. It's been a long day. As we finished dinner in silence, my mind raced. They didn't know that I knew, and I intended to keep it that way for now. I would play the part, bide my time, and plan my next move carefully. They wanted a game? They'd get one, but on my terms. The next morning, I didn't waste a second. I called off my classes, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Today wasn't about teaching, it was about reclaiming my life. My first stop was the lawyer's office. I laid everything out for him, the deception, the manipulation, and their plans against me. He was reassuring, clear that the law protected my inheritance. My house was mine alone, divorce or not. With divorce papers in hand, I headed back home, my resolve stealing with every step. The scene that greeted me was predictably frustrating. My mother-in-law, Martha, immediately started in on me for not having dinner ready. "Where have you been all day?" "We've been waiting for you to make dinner," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. I met her gaze, my patience worn thin. "I'm not your cook, Martha, or your maid. That ends now." Jake tried to smooth things over, with a hint of his plan peeking through. "Look, maybe this is a sign we should sell the house, start fresh somewhere else," he said, his voice too casual. His parents nodded eagerly, clearly liking where this was going. But I couldn't help it, I laughed, the absurdity of it all, their faces, it was too much. "Oh, Jake. I know about your plan, all of it." Silence crashed down like a wave. Jake's face went white, and Martha's mouth snapped shut. "What plan?" Jake managed, but his voice was shaky, guilty. With a deep breath, I laid the divorce papers on the table. "This plan. We're done. I want you and your parents out of my house," I declared. The outrage was instant. Martha was the first to explode. "You can't do this. We're family." "Family doesn't plot against each other," I shot back, my voice firm. Jake tried to argue, to plead, but I was unmoved. "I'm not falling for it, Jake. It's over. I've already spoken to a lawyer." His defeat was evident as he realized the gravity of the situation. They had no legal ground to stand on, no emotional manipulation left to play. Reluctantly, with anger and frustration boiling over, Jake and his parents packed their things and left. After they left, the silence in the house was deafening, but it was the sound of freedom. I sat alone in the dining room, the echoes of their departure still bouncing off the walls. It was over. I could finally breathe again, but the weight of what had transpired hung heavy in the air. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. The routine I had been so accustomed to, despite its toxicity, was gone. I decided to call my best friend, Sarah. If anyone could understand, it was her. "Hey, it's me," I said the moment she picked up. "Jennifer, what's wrong? You sound off." Sarah's voice was filled with concern. I laughed, a mix of relief and disbelief in my sound. "You won't believe what's happened. Jake and his parents, they're gone. I kicked them out." "What?" Sarah practically shouted, surprise evident in her tone. "Girl, what happened?" So, I told her everything, from the overheard conversation to the visit to the lawyer, and the final showdown. As I spoke, the reality of my newfound freedom began to sink in. "Wow, Jennifer, that's... I don't even know what to say." "Are you okay?" she asked after a moment of silence. "Yeah, I think I am. Better than I've been in a long time," I admitted, feeling a smile spread across my face. We chatted a bit longer, her support lifting my spirits even further. Hanging up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The house felt different now, it was mine again, truly mine. I could do whatever I wanted with it, fill it with new memories, maybe even redecorate. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I started making small changes around the house, clearing out reminders of Jake and his parents. With each box I packed away, I felt lighter, more in control of my destiny. I also threw myself into my online school, pouring every ounce of energy into something that was truly mine. It wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline, pulling me out of the murky waters of betrayal and onto solid ground. My students, my lessons, they gave me purpose, a reason to look forward every day. One afternoon, as I was prepping for a webinar that had piqued interest from corners of the globe I'd only dreamed of reaching, my phone rang. The screen flashed Martha's name, a name I hadn't seen or thought about in what felt like a lifetime. Curiosity overcame me, and I answered, bracing myself for whatever came next. "Jennifer, dear, it's Martha. We need your help," she stammered, her voice laced with a desperation I'd never heard from her before. I hesitated, memories of their betrayal flashing bright and hot. "What's happened?" I asked, my voice cool. Our house, the one we rented out, it's gone. Burned down because of some electrical fault, and well, the insurance. She trailed off, the weight of her omission hanging between us. And you didn't pay the insurance on time, so now you're out with nothing, I finished for her, not without a trace of cold satisfaction. Yes, exactly. We were wondering, hoping, really, that maybe we could stay with you, just for a little while, she pressed, each word more desperate than the last. The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. After everything, they still saw me as a safety net, their backup plan. I found my voice, steadier and colder than I intended. No, Martha. That's not possible. You're strangers to me now. Later, through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I learned about Jake's new reality. He'd taken a job far below the expectations and lifestyle he once held dear, just to scrape together enough for a roof over their heads and the basics. Part of me wanted to take satisfaction in his fall from grace, but another, deeper part of me just felt tired of the anger, the resentment. It was time to truly move on. I remember the day Linda stood there in her wedding dress, a stark contrast to the turmoil I was facing. Despite being my real sister, she often spoke without considering my feelings, saying things like, "Since you'll probably never get married, Amy, why don't you just enjoy looking at me in my wedding dress?" The words stung, but I tried to keep my distance, to maintain peace in my life. However, peace was the last thing I found. One day, out of the blue, my husband Mike dropped the bombshell that he wanted a divorce. We had been married for nearly 30 years, and the news shattered my world. I thought our marriage was strong, stable. The announcement was like a bolt out of the blue, leaving me questioning everything I thought was true about our life together. What had I done wrong? Had I unknowingly caused him trouble? A year after our separation, as I was still trying to piece together my shattered life, an invitation arrived. Mike was getting remarried. The thought of it was like a knife twisting in my heart. How could he move on so quickly? And to invite me to witness his new happiness, it felt like a mockery of the life we had shared. Amidst all this, my children, Emma and Jack, were my pillars of strength. Emma, a brilliant researcher at a top company, and Jack, who was studying hard to take the bar exam, were both kind, gentle, and incredibly smart. They were my pride and joy. When the divorce was finalized, I got custody of them. They assured me they would handle everything. "Don't worry, leave it to us. Just wait at home and relax," they told me with mischievous smiles as they left for Mike's wedding. Their confidence was comforting, yet it left me with a mix of apprehension and curiosity about what they planned to do. Life hadn't been easy. Mike, a sales director with years of international experience, was always a busy man, and I had supported him throughout our marriage. Quitting my job to take care of our home and children had been his wish, a decision I made willingly at the time but now questioned amidst the loneliness of an empty house. Every day, I battled with the pain and worry Mike's departure had brought. It worsened my menopause symptoms, adding physical anguish to my emotional distress. I had spent years worrying about his health, ensuring he could rest and recharge on his days off. Now, I was left to wonder about the sincerity of all those years. "Why do you want a divorce?" I had asked him repeatedly. But he refused to give me a clear reason, simply citing irreconcilable differences. It wasn't enough for me, it couldn't be. How could it be? His cold, dismissive attitude during our conversations was a far cry from the man I had loved and supported all these years. My trust in him had been deeply shaken. As I sat alone at home, waiting for the kids to return from the wedding, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and anticipation. What would they do? How would this day end? The uncertainty of the future loomed large, but one thing was clear: I was no longer the woman who could be swept aside without understanding, without closure. I needed answers, and hopefully, today would bring some. I couldn't believe what Emma just told me. I paused, the knife in my hand hovering over the chopping board. Linda and Mike together? It felt like the ground beneath me was giving way. My sister Linda, the very person I had always had a difficult relationship with, had been seen with Mike. The revelation sent a chill through me. Linda had moved into an apartment close to our neighborhood about a year ago. She'd come over to greet us once, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air during her visit. The conversation was forced and brief, and she left hastily, which I found strange but somewhat relieving, given our strained history. Growing up, Linda and I were never close. Our personalities clashed dramatically. She was often mean-spirited and manipulative, a master of subtle cruelty that adults never seemed to notice. I, on the other hand, was quieter, more sensitive. She knew how to push my buttons in a way that left me crying and looking like the troublemaker to our parents. Her tactics were clever, often cloaked in feigned kindness that fooled everyone but me. Her moving so close had unnerved me initially. Linda had been married and divorced several times, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her settling near me wasn't just a coincidence, but a calculated move. Now, with Emma's unsettling news, the pieces started to form a darker picture. Could there have been something going on between her and Mike even before our separation? I remembered back to our childhood, how Linda would manipulate situations to her advantage. One Christmas, shortly after I had started elementary school, stood out vividly in my memory. We had received dolls as gifts from our relatives, and I had been given a doll dressed in pink, the favorite among us kids. Linda, who received a less popular doll, decided she wanted mine. With all the adults distracted, she snatched it from me. Despite my protests, she tore the delicate pink dress, destroying the doll that I had been so thrilled to receive. Even then, her actions were ruthless, her intentions clear. As I stood in the kitchen, trying to make sense of Emma's words, the past and present blurred into a single, painful realization. Linda's presence in our neighborhood, the sudden breakup of my marriage, and now the possible connection between her and Mike, it all seemed too orchestrated to be mere coincidence. The uncertainty and betrayal made my heart race. I needed to confront this situation, to understand what was really going on. The thought of facing Linda, and possibly Mike, was daunting, but I knew I couldn't let this go. For my peace and for the sake of my children, I had to find out the truth behind Linda's actions and Mike's sudden desire for a divorce. The answers were crucial, not just for my healing, but also to protect my family from further harm. Frozen in shock at my sister Linda's latest deceit, I remember the tears spilling uncontrollably down my cheeks that Christmas. The adults, hearing my cries, rushed over, concern etching their faces. Linda, ever the actress, played her part perfectly, smoothing my hair and speaking in soothing tones. Amy broke her doll's dress, the poor thing. "I'll give her mine," she declared magnanimously. The adults immediately lauded her for her kindness, completely deceived by her performance. Meanwhile, I stood there, scolded for being careless, the sting of injustice sharp and bitter. There, in the crowded room, I was coerced into accepting the black-haired doll from Linda, my silent protest swallowed by the necessity to appear gracious. Forced to thank her, I felt humiliated as she smirked triumphantly at me. Not long after, a brand new doll, identical to the one I had lost, was delivered to our home. It was handed to Linda, who flaunted it cruelly, ensuring I knew that what should have been mine was now hers. These kinds of incidents were common. Living with Linda was a relentless ordeal, her pleasure in my discomfort evident. As I reflected on these memories, my anxiety about her current intentions grew. Linda had been a wild child, hardly focusing on her studies during her middle and high school years, choosing instead to spend her time with a rowdy crowd. "I'm not cut out for studying. I'd rather do fun things that I can only do now," she would declare, with a defiant glare that seemed to mock my diligence. Our parents were constantly worried about her. As she loitered for hours in front of Walmart with her dubious friends, their anxiety deepened. Her troublesome behavior led to frequent police calls, and she was often picked up wandering the streets late at night. Despite causing so much distress, Linda seemed indifferent to the turmoil she created. "One day I'll marry rich, and everyone will thank me," she would say with confidence, a hint of defiance in her voice. In contrast, I had always strived to be the conscientious, top-performing student, partly to compensate for the trouble Linda caused. My efforts paid off, and I gained the trust of my teachers and was chosen as a class representative. People often expressed surprise upon learning that Linda was my sister, so stark was our contrast. Linda, admittedly, was quite attractive, enough to turn heads on the street. But the charm that might have been visible in her elementary school days faded as she chose a path of rebellion and nightlife in her teenage years. Her beauty, I felt, was marred by her actions and the pain she inflicted on those around her. Now, with the unsettling information about her and Mike, these old wounds throbbed anew. The pattern of her life, the manipulation, and deceit, it all seemed to be converging into something sinister. My concern for what she might be plotting against me and my family deepened, fueled by the history of her callousness. The anxiety was palpable, a heavy, twisting knot in my stomach, as I wondered how to confront this potential new betrayal. During my first year of high school, as I was beginning to explore the world of teenage romance and had just started dating my first boyfriend, Linda's behavior escalated in ways that would leave a lasting scar on my early experiences of love. She had started smoking secretly by then, applying makeup heavily even though it was against school rules. The cheap cosmetics she used had a detrimental effect on her skin, causing it to deteriorate and her hair to lose its luster. Despite these visible changes, Linda remained blissfully unaware, still believing herself to be as captivating and charming as ever. Her situation only worsened when she began drinking alcohol. To everyone around us, her dreams of marrying rich seemed increasingly far-fetched and delusional. It was in this turbulent time that an incident occurred which exemplified just how far Linda's intrusive and manipulative nature could go. One afternoon, my boyfriend and I were enjoying a simple date at a fast food restaurant when Linda unexpectedly appeared. She approached us with a cunning smile, transforming her demeanor to that of a doting sister. "Amy, is this your friend? Introduce him to your big sister," she said smoothly. My boyfriend, caught off guard by her sudden presence, introduced himself politely. Linda maintained her charming facade, suggesting that we were close siblings, which couldn't have been further from the truth. As we prepared to leave for a movie, Linda feigned surprise and exclaimed, "Wow, what a coincidence. I wanted to see that movie too." Her intent to intrude on our date was clear, and while I was about to object, my boyfriend, in an attempt to be considerate, suggested we all watch it together. I was dismayed but didn't want to seem rude in front of him, so I reluctantly agreed. That movie date quickly turned into an ordeal. I was unable to enjoy the film, distracted by Linda's presence. To my horror, in the dim light of the theater, she had managed to position my boyfriend between us and, unbeknownst to me, even held his hand. 2 weeks later, my boyfriend ended our relationship, confessing he had found someone else he liked more. I instantly knew it was Linda. True to form, Linda briefly entertained a relationship with my ex-boyfriend before quickly losing interest and discarding him, just as she had with so many of her own past relationships. This pattern of behavior was classic Linda, using her superficial charm to disrupt and then abandoning the situation once she grew bored. Reflecting on these incidents, the pattern of Linda's actions over the years became painfully clear. Her life was a series of manipulations and reckless decisions, with little regard for the fallout on those around her, including me. As I dealt with the latest implications of her possible involvement with Mike, these memories of past betrayals added layers of complexity to my already troubled thoughts about her motives and character. The history of her deceit made me dread what she might be capable of now, not just to me, but to my entire family. Linda's sudden visit a month after Mike left was unexpected and unwelcome, her arrival sending a chill through me. I had a gut feeling about her reasons for coming. She wanted to pry into my personal turmoil, perhaps find some twisted satisfaction in my distress. "How are you doing, Amy?" she asked, her voice feigning concern as she placed her hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt more invasive than comforting. "What do you want, Linda?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She seemed slightly taken aback by my bluntness, but quickly masked her reaction with a feigned hurt expression. "You're being so cold," she said, trying to play the victim. Then, shifting the topic, she inquired about my children. How are Emma and Jack? Her sudden interest in them was puzzling and unsettling, given her usual indifference. They're not here, Linda. Emma is at work, and Jack is at college, I responded, not hiding my annoyance. It seemed obvious to me, but perhaps not to someone like Linda, who had no children and seemed perpetually disconnected from the realities of family life. Ah, right, she replied, her interest fading as quickly as it had appeared. She then casually made herself comfortable on the sofa, uninvited and unwelcome. Without preamble, she began to share more of her life drama. Amy, you just got divorced, and well, it looks like I'm headed that way too. I sighed internally, thinking, not this again. But outwardly, I remained composed, detached. Linda's personal life, filled with brief marriages and even quicker divorces, was a chaotic mess I had long decided to stay clear of. I had never met any of her previous husbands, and I had no desire to get involved with her latest troubles. Still, her pattern of marrying real catches only to end up in the divorce court was a cycle she seemed unable to break. As Linda rambled on, part of me wondered about the real reason behind her visit. Was it merely to share her misfortunes, or was there an ulterior motive? Her track record for manipulation and causing distress was well documented in the annals of our family history. I couldn't help but feel on edge, suspecting that there might be more to her story or perhaps some scheme brewing beneath her casual demeanor. Despite my reservations, I listened, a part of me pitying her for the loneliness that must surely lie at the heart of such a tumultuous life. Yet, I remained guarded, wary of whatever Linda might be planning or how it could potentially impact my family and me. As she continued talking, I found myself mentally preparing to deflect any of her typical manipulations or probing questions about my own recent divorce. The conversation felt like a minefield, one I had to navigate carefully to avoid any further emotional upheaval. Linda continued her tale, the details weaving into the fabric of her chaotic matrimonial history. He was a pilot for an airline, she began, recalling her first husband with a hint of nostalgia in her voice. You wouldn't believe how they met, but they seemed really in love at the time. I remembered how she used to brag about her glamorous married life, often taunting me with remarks like, "Since you'll probably never get married, why don't you just enjoy looking at me in my wedding dress?" Yet, as was typical with Linda, the fairy tale didn't last. Her in-laws were a constant source of friction. They lived together, and with her husband often away due to his job, Linda grew bored and restless. She started going out frequently, seeking entertainment and excitement, which infuriated her in-laws. Eventually, even her husband reached his limit and kicked her out. Her second marriage, to a younger man she met while working at a bar, started with promise. He owned his own business and seemed mild-mannered, a stark contrast to Linda's more dominant personality. At first, they were really in love, Linda recounted, her voice tinged with a rare note of regret. But then money started disappearing from his store safe, a safe to which only the two of them had keys. Her husband tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first, hoping it was just a misunderstanding that would resolve itself. But as the amount missing surpassed $20,000, he could no longer ignore the issue. When he finally confronted her, Linda deflected with blatant disregard, suggesting it might be a miscalculation. However, her husband had installed surveillance cameras, which captured her sneaking to the safe and clearly showed her taking the money. He confronted her with the evidence, agreeing not to involve the police on the condition that she return the stolen money and agree to a divorce. Thus, her second marriage ended disastrously. My parents, ever the rescuers, ended up repaying the money Linda stole, along with providing alimony to smooth over the divorce. Now, Linda was with her third husband, a carpenter with a rough temperament. When things are good, they're really good, she said, but when they're bad. Her voice trailed off, and I could imagine the volatile scenes she described. Their fights were intense, often resulting in noise complaints from neighbors in their apartment complex. And now, contemplating my third divorce, Linda mused, almost as if it were an inevitable milestone rather than a consequence of her actions. I listened, half in disbelief, half in resignation. Despite the chaos she described, there was a part of me that still hoped she would find some stability, if not for her sake then for the sake of our aging parents who were continuously caught in the fallout of her turbulent life. As she sat there, talking about possibly ending her third marriage, I reflected on the pattern of her life, the repeated cycles of excitement and disaster. It was hard not to feel a mix of pity and frustration. Linda, with all her flaws, was still my sister, and despite everything, I hoped that one day she might find the peace and happiness that seemed so elusive to her. But for now, I braced myself for whatever came next, knowing well the unpredictability that came with being Linda's sister. As the weight of Linda's words sank in, I was dumbstruck. The chaos she so naturally brought everywhere followed her into my home once again, leaving a trail of shock and disruption. "Amy, you got divorced too, so we're really sisters after all." "We actually get along well," she had declared with a bizarre cheerfulness that only made the situation feel more surreal. Her laughter echoed in my ears, a sound that seemed to come from someone deeply disconnected from the emotional gravity of her actions. Her eyes, gleaming with a mix of triumph and challenge, only added to the discomfort. "Listen, the reason I'm getting divorced is that I found someone new who loves me. We've promised to be together," she revealed, her tone almost casual, as if announcing a mundane daily schedule rather than a fourth upcoming marriage. The news left me speechless. How could she be so flippant, so reckless? And with whom could she possibly be planning to marry this time? I managed a response, playing along while hiding my growing unease. "Is that so?" "You've always been popular," I said, a statement she took as a compliment, laughing loudly. "That's right, men can't stay away from me." Her face, heavily made up, twisted into an expression of satisfaction that made me shudder inwardly. Finally, declaring that there was nothing more to do here since the kids weren't home, she left, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief, but also a lingering dread. I felt drained, as if her presence siphoned away my energy, leaving me to grapple with the reality of our relation, so alien yet bound by blood. That evening, as I was still processing the day's revelations, Emma walked into the living room, her usually composed face pale, her voice shaky. "Mom, there's a wedding invitation," she said, handing me a piece of cardstock that trembled in her hands. Her distress was palpable, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. "It's from Dad," she added, her words dropping like stones into the silence of the room. Taking the invitation from her, I opened it with trembling hands, my heart sinking as I read the names, Mike and Linda. The reality of the situation crashed over me like a wave. My ex-husband Mike, the man I had spent years with, was marrying my sister Linda. The betrayal was profound, almost theatrical in its cruelty. How could they do this, to me, to us? My emotions swirled, anger, betrayal, disbelief, as I crumpled the invitation in my hand. My devotion to Mike, my avoidance of any conflict with Linda, none of it had mattered. They had chosen this path, deliberately, to wound and to shock. Then, as if on cue, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Linda's name, and with a deep breath, I answered, already knowing what she would say. "Amy, have you figured it out yet? I'm marrying your ex-husband Mike. I stole him away." Her voice was smug, triumphant. Linda had always coveted what was mine, and now she had reached out for the most painful grab yet, my husband. The call, the invitation, the news, it was all too much. I stood there, phone in hand, the crushed invitation on the floor, my mind racing with hurt and a burning question: how could I possibly navigate through this betrayal? The road ahead seemed daunting, filled with emotional debris from the wreckage of my family's bonds. As I hung up the phone, the silence of the room enveloped me, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. Hearing Linda's voice over the phone detailing how she deliberately got close to Mike by inviting him out for lunch from the company cafeteria, a place he frequently visited, was almost too much to bear. Her pride in manipulating the situation, in winning him over so effortlessly, made my hands tremble. Everything seemed to blur before my eyes as she gleefully recounted her strategy. It became painfully clear why Mike had never fully explained why he wanted a divorce. The echoes of my past, of that long-ago boyfriend from middle school days, resurfaced, stark reminders of the pain I had experienced then, now magnified in the betrayal by my husband and my sister. Linda's laughter rang in my ears, a sound filled with malice and satisfaction. I've always been annoyed that you married an elite like Mike. My first marriage was a success, you know, but my mother-in-law drove me out. Why always me? So, I wanted you to feel the same way I did, she said. The cruelty in her voice was palpable, pushing me to the brink of yelling back at her, but I managed to hold back. Her justifications, her snide remarks, it all showcased her true nature, one driven by jealousy and revenge. You were always disliked by your in-laws because you were always out playing around, I finally responded, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside. Her amusement faded into a snort, an ugly sound that filled the brief silence. Shut up. Anyway, make sure you come to our wedding. I'll show you how happy we are. You'll see how much Mike adores me, she said before hanging up, leaving her words hanging like a dark cloud. I collapsed into a chair, my body shaking from the emotional toll. Emma rushed over to comfort me, rubbing my back, as Jack entered through the front door. Mom, are you okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern. My pale face and Emma's worried gestures alarmed him. What's wrong, Mom? Did something happen? Taking a deep breath, I shared the contents of the phone call with them. Emma and Jack, usually so calm and rational, looked stunned as they processed the news. I can't believe Dad would do something like that, Jack said, his voice heavy with disbelief. It was unbelievable, indeed, and all the more painful, because I had always tried to protect them from the darker aspects of my relationship with Linda. Feeling the weight of years of silence, I began to unfold the entire history of harassment, betrayal, and repeated divorces inflicted by Linda. As I spoke, their expressions grew increasingly troubled. Can't be true. This is too much, Jack said, his face contorting with disgust. Sharing everything, though painful, lifted a slight weight from my shoulders. I thanked them for their support and made it clear that I wouldn't attend the wedding. But then, Emma's eyes sparkled with a sudden idea. Wait, we're invited too, right? Her question hung in the air, suggesting she might have a plan or a reason to consider attending that I hadn't thought of. Curiosity and a flicker of hope mingled with my apprehension as I waited for her to explain. Emma looked like she was barely containing her emotions, managing to keep a composed smile as Linda, adorned in an ostentatious wedding dress, called out to her and Jack in that overly sweet tone. Call me Mom, she had said, stretching out her arms as if to embrace them both in front of the gathered guests. The video panned to show Jack and Emma exchanging a quick, knowing look before facing Linda again. The room was lavishly decorated, the opulence of the hotel evident in every corner. Despite the grandeur, the atmosphere felt somewhat forced, as if trying to project an image of familial bliss that didn't truly exist. Mom, we knew what we were doing, Emma explained as they showed me the footage. We wanted to see for ourselves what Dad was getting into, and we wanted to make sure Linda knew we were not part of her games. Jack chimed in, yeah, and we made sure to have a chat with Dad too. We told him straight that trying to take custody was out of the question. We're adults, and our lives are with you. He seemed to get the message. In the video, after Linda's cringe-worthy attempt to play the doting stepmother, Emma and Jack tactfully extracted themselves from her embrace and mingled with other guests, all while keeping a respectful distance from Linda. They managed to capture snippets of conversations, Linda's behavior, and the general atmosphere, which seemed less like a celebration of union and more like a showcase of vanity. We also talked to some of Dad's colleagues, Emma continued as the video showed them interacting with various guests. We wanted them to know that we were there to support Dad as his children, not as part of Linda's new family narrative. Jack added, it was important for us to represent ourselves correctly, to make sure everyone understood where we stand. Plus, we wanted to gather some insights. Their strategy was clear, they attended not to celebrate but to observe, to protect, and to reaffirm their loyalty to me, their real family. They had handled the situation with maturity and tact, ensuring that Linda's manipulations did not redefine our family dynamics. As the video ended, I saw Linda reveling in the attention, oblivious to the true sentiments of her stepchildren. The sight was both sad and oddly satisfying. My children had stood their ground, not swayed by her theatrics or the superficial glamour of the event. "Mom, we wanted you to see this because we knew it would help you feel better," Emma said, giving me a hug. "To see that we can handle Linda and that we're always going to be your kids, no matter what Dad or Linda try to do." Their smiles, full of love and reassurance, warmed my heart. They had gone into a potentially distressing situation and handled it with poise, coming back to me not just unscathed but empowered. They had seen through the facade and returned with the unshakable certainty of where their loyalties lay. "Thank you, both of you," I said, feeling a mix of relief and pride. "You've both grown up so much, and I couldn't be prouder. Let's not let this affect us anymore. We have each other, and that's what truly matters." As they nodded in agreement, I realized that whatever Linda and Mike were plotting or whatever life threw at us next, we would face it together as a family, stronger and more united than ever. As Emma and I watched the video of Jack's unexpected speech at the wedding, my heart was a mix of pride and sorrow. Jack had bravely confronted the awkward truths in front of a room full of guests, many of whom were oblivious to the intricate web of deception that Linda had spun around our family. Jack's voice was calm yet carried a weight that echoed through the hall as he spoke. "Congratulations on your marriage, Dad and Aunt Linda," he began, causing a few smiles among the guests who expected nothing more than a standard congratulatory speech from a son. But as he continued, the mood shifted dramatically. "Between the two of you, 6 marriages. That's not normal." "Oh, I get it, Aunt Linda, you snatched your sister's husband. That's pretty low. You were never normal, were you?" The room filled with whispers and gasps. The shock was palpable, the guests' faces turning from polite interest to disbelief and discomfort. Linda's manipulations, once hidden, were now laid bare in a public and irrefutable manner. Jack didn't stop there. He delved deeper, revealing the calculated nature of Linda's actions. "Today, I'm going to read a bit of my mom's diary. Turns out, my mom is the woman whose husband was stolen by today's bride. Funny thing, the bride is actually her sister. Linda came and told me she was marrying my ex-husband 6 months ago. I was forced into a divorce by my husband who she always got along with. So, that's what it was all about." As Jack recounted these details, Mike's face turned pale. He sat there, the reality of his decisions and the lies he had believed crashing down around him. Jack continued, revealing how Linda had manipulated not only their personal lives, but also infiltrated Mike's professional space under the guise of coincidence. "My sister applied for a part-time job at Mike's company, pretending it was just happenstance, to get close to him. She then frequently seduced Mike and lied to him, saying I was badmouthing him on social media. I don't even use social media, but according to her, there were posts insulting Mike. It turns out she created a fake account in my name. Sadly, Mike believed all this." The room was silent, the weight of Jack's words hanging heavy. As Linda returned to the reception in her new outfit, the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. There was no applause, no smiles of congratulation, only a stunned silence and uncomfortable murmurs. Mike, still trembling, now understood the depth of the deception, realizing too late that he had been a pawn in Linda's game. Emma and I watched as the video captured these moments, feeling a mix of vindication and heartache. Jack and Emma had shown incredible courage and loyalty, standing up for what was right despite the potential for personal pain. It was a bittersweet victory, one that didn't undo the past but offered a clear view of the truth. Sitting back, I felt a complex cascade of emotions. There was sorrow for the pain my children had endured, relief that the truth was finally out, and a renewed sense of connection with Emma and Jack, who had proven themselves to be more than just my children, they were my champions. As we turned off the video, I knew that while the road ahead would be difficult, we would face it together, as a family, fortified by truth and bound by unwavering support for one another. As Linda's former husbands entered the room one by one, each story of success more striking than the last, the atmosphere at the wedding became increasingly tense. Linda, adorned in her golden dress and tiara, which now seemed more like a garish costume than regal attire, watched in growing disbelief and irritation. Her smile faltered as Emma introduced each ex-husband, their stories a stark contrast to the narrative she had no doubt spun about them. The first husband, now an executive, the second a best-selling author with a happy family and a mansion, and the third, once a humble carpenter, now a vice president of a nationwide construction company. Each revelation struck a chord, and Linda's face turned from shock to anger, her expression one of someone who felt the world was conspiring against her. Emma and Jack, presenting this information not with malice, but as a form of poetic justice, smiled gently at Linda's reaction. They had not just come to expose her deceit, they wanted to show that those she had dismissed and discarded had moved on to better, happier lives. Linda, unable to contain her envy and frustration, snapped at the mention of her third husband. "That's just someone who used to get into trouble a lot. He'll never be successful." "I win," she blurted out defensively. But Jack, with a soft but firm tone, corrected her. "Aunt Linda, that's not very nice," he said, his disapproval clear. Emma added, echoing her brother, "We hope you find happiness too, Aunt Linda." The room fell silent as the weight of Emma and Jack's words hung in the air. Linda's face turned pale, her facade crumbling. She had always underestimated those around her, seeing them only as stepping stones or obstacles to her desires. Now confronted with their successes, her own failures and insecurities were laid bare for all to see. Her reaction escalated quickly from shock to outright anger. In a fit of hysteria, she slammed the wedding bouquet onto the floor, her actions uncontrolled and wild. "Mike will just end up as a sales manager, right? He was Amy's husband after all." "Ah, what a mistake," she cried out, her voice filled with bitterness and regret. The tension reached a peak when she slammed her fist on the table, causing a loud bang that echoed through the room. Mike, until now a silent, grim spectator to the unfolding drama, finally lost his patience. His face turned red with anger as he stood up, shouting back at Linda, "Don't mess around." The confrontation was a shocking spectacle for everyone present, revealing not just the personal failings and resentments between Linda and Mike, but also the underlying insecurities and flaws that had led them to this point. The guests, previously uncomfortable, now looked on with a mix of pity and dismay, witnessing the unraveling of a relationship that was supposed to be celebrated. As the event spiraled out of control, I sat at home, watching the recording, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness. It was clear that no amount of success or revenge could heal the wounds inflicted by years of deceit and manipulation. The only path forward, I realized, was one of forgiveness and moving on, not for Linda's sake, but for my own peace and the well-being of my children, who had shown incredible strength and maturity through it all. That it was important to at least acknowledge the pain caused and to try to mend what was broken. They nodded to each other, a silent agreement that while the past couldn't be changed, the future still held room for reconciliation and healing. Amidst the ruins of the wedding, I watched through the video as Mike's expression shifted from fury to despair. His career, his marriage, his public persona, all had been compromised. The man who had stood at the altar ready to embark on a new chapter was now grappling with the consequences of his choices and the deception that had led him there. Linda, her face streaked with tears, looked utterly defeated. Her schemes, once so cunningly crafted, had unraveled spectacularly, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. As Mike declared his intent for divorce and alimony, her pleading intensified, but there was no sympathy left in the room for her. The guests had dispersed, leaving behind only the stark reality of her actions and their fallout. Emma and Jack, having exposed the truth, felt a mix of triumph and sadness. They hadn't wanted destruction, but felt compelled to reveal the deception, to protect their family and their mother's honor. As they high-fived, it was not out of joy but out of relief that their task was done, and perhaps now, healing could begin. Mike approached them, his face a complex mask of regret and sorrow. "I was wrong. I did terrible things to Amy. She probably won't forgive me, but I need to apologize somehow," he confessed, tears beginning to form. It was a moment of vulnerability they had never seen from him. Emma and Jack were taken aback, witnessing the breakdown of a man who had been a pillar of strength and authority in their lives, now recognizing his missteps. As their father broke down, Emma and Jack exchanged glances, their feelings mixed. They had grown up admiring their father, and seeing him manipulated and brought low by Linda stirred complex emotions. While they could not erase the past, they understood that their father's acknowledgement of his mistakes was a step towards something more positive. Jack spoke up, his voice steady. "Dad, we can try to understand, and we can try to move forward, but it has to be with honesty from now on." Emma nodded in agreement, adding, "And you need to make things right with Mom first. She deserves that much." As the dust settled on what was supposed to be a festive celebration, the scene at the wedding was a poignant reminder of the complexities of family dynamics and the deep wounds that deception can cause. Yet, it also underscored a potential path towards redemption and forgiveness. For my children, their actions had set the stage for a possible reconciliation, or at the very least, a closure that could lead to peace. For me, hearing Mike's remorse opened a door I thought had been closed forever. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary, and perhaps, in time, healing could begin for us all. As I stood in the doorway, the brisk evening air mixing with the lingering warmth of the house, I felt a confusing whirl of emotions. My children, Emma and Jack, had just brought home the chaos and closure of what should have been a celebratory event. Their laughter and bright expressions were a stark contrast to the gravity of the revelations they carried. Emma, ever the bearer of surprising news, spoke up gently, "Actually, Dad is outside. He wants to apologize to you, Mom." My heart skipped a beat. Mike, here, at this house, after everything that had happened? It was almost too much to take in. Jack added supportively, "Dad doesn't expect forgiveness, Mom, but he really wants to apologize. Why not hear him out?" His maturity and empathy were grounding, reminding me that no matter what had happened, our family had grown stronger through these trials. With a deep breath, bolstered by the presence of my incredible children, I stepped outside to face Mike. He looked worn and defeated, a far cry from the composed and ambitious man I had married. The disarray of his appearance spoke volumes about the turmoil he had just endured. "Amy, I was a fool. I'm truly sorry," he started, his voice hoarse. The sincerity in his tone was palpable, and for a moment, I saw the man I had once loved, vulnerable and regretful. "Linda will pay me alimony, and I'll give it all to you," he continued, offering what he thought might be a form of restitution. I nodded, acknowledging his apology and the gesture, though it did little to mend the deeper wounds. "You two were misled by my sister," I said softly, a statement more for myself, affirming that the deception had layers even I was still uncovering. "Can we start over again?" he asked tentatively, reaching for my arm. The question hung in the air, heavy and implausible. The kids, who had followed me out, looked on, their faces a mix of hope and disbelief. But I knew what needed to be done. "That's impossible, goodbye," I said firmly, and gently closed the front door. Mike lingered, a silhouette of lost chances, before turning away and disappearing into the night. Meanwhile, Linda, the instigator of so much pain, found herself isolated and struggling. Fired from her part-time job, she floundered at a convenience store and even tried her hand at a nightclub, where she was blatantly rejected by patrons, preferring the company of younger women. Her life had become a series of humiliations and challenges, her actions having led her to a lonely and difficult existence. Back inside, the calm of my home enveloped me. Jack, already showing great promise in his law studies, and Emma, ever my rock, reassured me of their love and support. We were moving forward, our bond strengthened by adversity, looking towards a future filled with hope. My children's promises to always cherish me filled my heart to the brim. In this newfound peace, I realized that while the past could not be undone, the love and strength of my family offered a foundation for happiness and healing that no external chaos could ever undermine. With my children by my side, I couldn't be happier. Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up when I walked into a room. Now, I'm lucky if I get a grunt before he buries his nose back into his phone. His job's the same, maybe even less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. "Another painting, Grace?" What's that, the third this week? Mark's voice would grip the air, sharp and smearing, whenever he watched me set up my easel. He used to admire my work, even had my best piece framed in his office once. Not anymore. Yeah, so it's not like I'm spending your money, I'd answer, trying not to let him see the tremble in my hands, keeping my focus on mixing the blues and yellows on my palette. But inside, each word he volleyed felt like a punch. Could have fooled me. And look at this place, looks like a damn tornado hit it. He'd scan the room, his eyes scanning every toy and blanket out of place, holding them up like evidence of my failures. Look, I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful, I'd fight back, my voice not as steady as I'd liked, and maybe if you helped a little around here. Help with what? You're home all the time, you deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the cash, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage, he'd cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same, with him turning away and dismissing me with a scoff when he left for work. Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes confused. Daddy mad, she would ask, her tiny lips quivering at the thought. No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. Here, help Mommy choose the colors. Yeah, I'd pull her into my arms, trying to smile for her sake, guiding her hand to pick out colors together. Together, we'd paint, and for a while, the bitterness in Mark's tone would get drowned out by her laughter and our shared world of color. I knew my paintings were good, not because I was full of myself, but because they were the only thing I had left from a time when I felt confident, vibrant. That evening when Mark came home, I did what I always did. I tried to greet him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily, squeaky from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. Hey, I said, the smell of roast chicken trailing behind me, how was your day? He grunted in reply, shrugging off his coat and throwing it over the couch. His eyes caught mine, then the easel set up in the corner of our living room. Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, he remarked. Tib with your life, Grace, they don't understand Mark, they don't understand what it's like to pour your heart into something only to have it ridiculed and belittled. I swallowed hard, my throat dry with humiliation and anger. It's not a hobby, I protested weakly, but my words fell on deaf ears. Mark's laughter echoed in the room, mingling with his parents' scornful remarks. I felt small, insignificant, like my dreams were nothing but dust in the wind. But as they laughed and mocked, a fire ignited within me. I refused to let them extinguish my passion, my love for painting. Their words may sting, but they wouldn't break me. I straightened my spine, meeting their gazes with defiance burning in my eyes. Maybe I will get a job, I declared, my voice steady despite the tremble in my hands. But I'll never stop painting. This is who I am, and no one, not even you, can take that away from me. With that, I turned away from their mocking faces, returning to my easel with renewed determination. They may not understand, but I didn't need their approval. I had Lily, my daughter, who looked at me with adoration and belief. I had my art, my sanctuary, where I could pour my soul onto the canvas and find solace in the colors and strokes. And, most importantly, I had myself, a woman determined to defy the expectations and limitations placed upon her. As the evening wore on, I lost myself in my painting, blocking out the sound of their laughter and the weight of their judgment. With each brushstroke, I reclaimed a piece of myself, building a bridge to a future where my dreams were not just dreams, but a vibrant reality. And as the colors danced across the canvas, I knew that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would face them with courage and conviction. For I was Grace, an artist, a mother, and a fighter, and nothing could dim the light of my spirit. Grace, it's about budgeting. I felt my frustration boiling over, bubbling beneath the surface like a pot ready to boil over. Well, maybe if you understood that my painting is more than just a hobby, you wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it, I retorted, my voice rising in defiance. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the faint sound of Lily babbling in her room down the hall. Then, Mark sighed heavily, the weight of his disapproval hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "Fine, Grace. Do whatever you want," he muttered, his tone resigned. "But don't come crying to me when we're struggling to make ends meet." His words stung, but I refused to let them break me. I had made a choice to pursue my passion, to reclaim a part of myself that had been buried beneath the weight of expectations and obligations. And I wasn't about to let anyone, not even Mark, take that away from me. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and unlocked the bedroom door. As I descended the stairs, I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to capitulate, to admit defeat. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I would keep painting, keep fighting for my dreams, no matter what obstacles lay in my path. And as I joined them at the table to clear away the remnants of our meal, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope igniting within me. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to carve out a space for myself in this world, one brushstroke at a time. Grace, budget. That word felt like a choke chain tightening around my throat. "I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark," I retorted, the frustration evident in my voice. But Mark wasn't having it. "Your money's our money, isn't it?" he shot back, his tone dripping with disdain. "And your money is running out fast." Later, at the store, every choice felt like a battle. I carefully selected the cheapest brands, counting every penny, every compromise, acutely aware of Mark's disapproving gaze. Back home, as I unpacked the groceries, I could feel his eyes boring into me, scrutinizing every item as if searching for a mistake. "Putting back some luxuries, are we?" Mark commented, his tone laced with sarcasm. I shrugged, avoiding his gaze, hiding the receipts like a guilty secret. "Prices went up, had to make some cuts," I replied tersely, hoping to end the conversation. But Mark wasn't finished. "Don't see any cuts in your art budget though," he remarked, his voice cold and accusatory. I clenched my fists, feeling my anger rise. "This keeps me sane, Mark," I insisted, my voice trembling with emotion. "My art keeps me sane." Mark's response was like a punch to the gut. "Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, he sneered, his words cutting deep. That night, as I painted, it wasn't out of passion, but out of frustration. Each stroke felt like a compromise, a sacrifice made to fit within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings, when he decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding distant and disconnected. "Grace, you've got to pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara," he said, his tone brusque and demanding. I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of resentment wash over me. It wasn't fair, I thought bitterly. When was it my turn to pursue my own dreams, to chase after my own desires? But as I stood there, staring at the blank canvas before me, I made a silent vow to myself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would stay true to myself and my art. And as the colors bloomed across the canvas, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. No one could take that away from me, not even Mark. I smiled at Lily's curiosity, her innocence a welcome distraction from the mounting pressure. "Mommy's making a special gift for a lady Daddy works with," I explained, gently taking the brush from her tiny fingers. Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement, her imagination already spinning tales of the masterpiece I was about to create. With Lily by my side, I dove into my work with renewed vigor. Every stroke of the brush felt like a small victory, a step closer to bringing my vision to life. I lost track of time as I poured my heart and soul into the canvas, each color and line a reflection of my passion and determination. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, but I didn't falter. I was on a mission, fueled by the desire to prove to myself, and perhaps to Mark too, that my art was more than just a hobby, it was a gift, a talent that deserved to be celebrated. As the final brushstroke fell into place, I stepped back to admire my handiwork. The painting was a masterpiece, a true labor of love. I could feel the pride welling up inside me, threatening to spill over. The day of Clara's birthday arrived, and with it came a sense of nervous anticipation. Would she like my gift? Would she see the effort and thought that had gone into it? As Clara unwrapped the painting, her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh my goodness, Grace, this is beautiful," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine delight. "You made this?" I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "Yes, I did. I wanted to give you something personal, something that reflects your love for art." Clara smiled, her gratitude palpable. "Thank you, Grace. This is truly special." As I watched Clara admire her gift, I felt a sense of validation wash over me. My art had brought joy to someone else's life, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would never stop creating. For me, for Lily, and for anyone else who needed a little bit of beauty in their lives. As I approached Clara's birthday bash, my heart raced with anticipation and anxiety. The painting nestled in my arms felt like a weight, a culmination of days of hard work and emotional investment. I moved through the crowd, eyes lowered, wishing I could disappear into the background. Mark was there too, just arrived from his latest business trip, his demeanor exuding confidence and success. But as his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of something in his expression, a mixture of surprise, disdain, and perhaps even a hint of resentment. It was a look I knew all too well, one that spoke volumes without saying a word. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the polished women in their cocktail dresses, before settling back on me. I felt a knot form in the pit of my stomach, a familiar sense of inadequacy creeping in. But then, something shifted. His eyes narrowed, his lips forming a silent judgment as they settled on the parcel in my hands. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The noise of the party faded into the background, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction, unsure of what to expect. But then, without a word, Mark turned away, his attention drawn to someone else in the crowd. I exhaled slowly, the tension draining from my body as I realized that his opinion no longer mattered to me. I had poured my heart and soul into this painting, and whether he approved or not was inconsequential. With renewed determination, I made my way to Clara, the painting held out like a peace offering. As she unwrapped it, her eyes lit up with delight, her smile genuine and heartfelt. "Oh, Grace, this is beautiful," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell within me. In that moment, surrounded by friends and colleagues, I realized that my worth wasn't defined by Mark's approval or anyone else's. I was enough, just as I was, and my art was a reflection of that truth. As the party continued around us, I basked in the warmth of Clara's gratitude, knowing that I had created something special, something that mattered. And as I looked around at the faces of those around me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The tension in the room was palpable as I peeled back the wrapping, revealing the painting beneath. Colors exploded into the space, vibrant and alive, each brushstroke a testament to my dedication and passion. Clara's eyes widened in surprise, her expression a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. "Wow," she breathed, her voice cutting through the silence that had settled over the room. "This is incredible." I felt a surge of relief wash over me as the weight of Mark's disapproval lifted from my shoulders. Maybe this was my chance to prove him wrong, to show him that my art was more than just a hobby, it was a gift, a talent to be celebrated. The room erupted into applause, the tension dissipating like mist in the morning sun. I glanced over at Mark, expecting to see a hint of pride or maybe even a begrudging nod of approval, but his expression remained unreadable, a mask of stoic indifference. Clara approached, her eyes shining with genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Grace," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." I smiled, a sense of pride swelling within me. In that moment, surrounded by friends and colleagues, I realized that my art had the power to touch people's lives, to bring joy and beauty into the world. As the party continued around us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew that I would never stop creating, never stop chasing after my dreams. And as I looked around at the faces of those gathered, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Clara's words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. The idea of showcasing my work in a gallery seemed both exhilarating and terrifying. Could I really take such a leap of faith, expose my art to the scrutiny of strangers? But as I looked into Clara's determined gaze, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was time to stop doubting myself, to embrace the opportunities that lay before me. I glanced over at Mark, half expecting to see a sneer or a dismissive remark, but to my surprise, his expression was unreadable. Was it possible that even he saw the potential in my art, despite his earlier criticisms? Clara's encouragement bolstered my resolve, filling me with a newfound sense of confidence. I think I'd like that, I finally managed to say, the words feeling foreign and yet undeniably right. Clara beamed, her approval like a beacon guiding me forward. Great! I'll put you in touch with some people I know. We'll get your work out there, Grace. I have a feeling you're going to make quite the impression. As the party continued around us, the weight of Mark's disapproval seemed to lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful, excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. And as I stood there, surrounded by friends and colleagues, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. With Clara's support and encouragement, I was ready to take the next step on my journey as an artist, wherever it might lead. As the whispers and murmurs swirled around me like a whirlwind, I felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation coursing through my veins. People who had barely acknowledged me before were now hanging on my arm, eager to discuss my artwork. It was surreal, like stepping into someone else's life, someone braver and more confident than the woman I used to be. But amidst the crowd, amidst the newfound attention and acclaim, Mark's presence loomed large, his hand on my back burning like a brand. His words cut through the chatter, sharp and accusing, his disbelief palpable. I turned to face him, the weight of his doubt heavy on my shoulders. Yes, I am serious, I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside me. We've been over for a long time, Mark. It's time to make it official. The truth hung in the air, between us, a bitter pill to swallow, but one that needed to be said. Mark looked stunned, his usual confidence shaken. For a moment, he seemed lost for words, and then, without another glance, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped with defeat. Clara's hand on my shoulder brought me back to the present, her concern a balm to my wounded pride. You okay, hon? She asked, her eyes filled with empathy. I nodded, a surge of gratitude washing over me. I am, thanks to you, I replied, managing a small smile. What are friends for, right? With Clara's encouragement ringing in my ears, I felt a newfound sense of purpose coursing through my veins. The path ahead might be uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure, I was ready to embrace it, to light up this town with my art and with the love of my daughter by my side. As I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of hope stirring within me. There was an ending, yes, but there was also a beginning, a new chapter painted in the boldest colors of possibility. With Lily at my side, I knew we would be more than fine. We would be us, unapologetically and unfalteringly us. With a renewed sense of purpose, I turned to Clara, gratitude shining in my eyes. And you, Grace, she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, you're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait. Her words echoed in my mind as I watched Mark disappear into the crowd, his departure marking the end of an era and the beginning of something new. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. As the party continued around us, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me, like a bird released from its cage. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with color and life. With Lily by my side, I knew that anything was possible. Together, we would forge our own path, unbound by the constraints of the past. And as I looked into her eyes, bright with excitement and possibility, I knew that our journey was just beginning. The road ahead might be uncertain, but with each step, I would paint my own destiny, one brushstroke at a time. And as the night wore on and the laughter and music filled the air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement for the adventures that lay ahead. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And as I stood there, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with courage and determination. Because after all, life was like a painting, messy, unpredictable, but beautiful in its own way. And with Lily by my side, I was ready to create the masterpiece of our dreams. As the night wore on, the weight of the decision I had made began to settle in. But amidst the uncertainty, there was also a newfound sense of liberation. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly living, embracing the freedom to pursue my passion without reservation. With Clara's support and encouragement, I knew that I had made the right choice. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had doubted me, I felt a surge of pride. I had proven them wrong, shown them that I was capable of so much more than they had ever imagined. With Lily's hand clasped in mine, I made a silent vow to never again let fear or doubt hold me back. The road ahead might be challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with nothing but my determination and my love for art. As the party drew to a close and the guests began to depart, I felt a sense of anticipation stirring within me. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with endless possibilities and boundless creativity. With a smile on my face and a heart full of hope, I took one last look around the room before turning towards the door. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but with Clara by my side and Lily in my arms, I knew that I was ready to take on whatever challenges lay in store. And as we stepped out into the night, the stars shining brightly overhead, I knew that this was only the beginning of our adventure together. With each step forward, we would paint our own destiny, one stroke at a time. Hey everybody, name's Emma, and if you've got a minute, I've got a tale that's a bit of a roller coaster, one that dives into love, betrayal, and a fight for dignity. But before we dive into the deep end, let me set the stage and introduce you to the cast of this little drama of mine. It starts with me, Emma, born into what many would call privilege, with a silver spoon and all that jazz. But despite the cushy start, I was raised to value hard work over handouts. My dad's the king of the engine additive world, a self-made man who turned a niche into an empire. Mom's no slouch either, she built a beauty salon empire from the ground up, making her name synonymous with style. Their divorce when I was 19 could have been messy, but they kept it classy, splitting everything down the middle while somehow maintaining a friendship. Dad stayed single, content with his business and bachelorhood, while Mom remarried but didn't expand the family beyond me. Enter Jake, stage right, my husband, or as I've come to think of him, the catalyst of my personal upheaval. We got hitched when I was fresh out of college after I landed a job teaching music to kids with more energy than sense. Life seemed pretty sweet until we hit a bump. I got pregnant, and suddenly Jake's true colors started to bleed through. One lazy Sunday, sprawled on the couch with his feet up, Jake casually lobbed the grenade into our life. Emma, babe, why don't you just quit your job, stay at home with the baby? We'll manage. I nearly choked on my tea. Quit my job? Jake, you know we can't afford that on your salary alone, plus I love my work. He waved a hand dismissively, a smirk playing on his lips. Come on, Em, it's not like we're ordinary folks. Your dad's loaded. A little help from him and we're golden. I felt my blood boil. That's not the point, Jake. I'm not tapping into my parents' wealth for our day-to-day. We agreed to live within our means. But Jake wouldn't let it go. Over dinner, in front of his parents no less, he brought it up again. Emma's considering taking some time off work, you know, with the baby coming and all. His mom Carol, a woman with a sharp tongue and an eye for advantage, jumped in. Oh, that's wonderful with Emma's family. You two don't have to worry about a thing. I clenched my fork a little tighter, trying to keep my cool. Actually, we haven't decided anything, and we intend to manage on our own. Thank you, Jake's dad, Frank, never one to miss a beat, chimed in with a chuckle. Why play the hard way, Emma? A little help from your folks and you could be living easy. Why waste that opportunity? The conversation spiraled from there, with Jake and his parents painting grand pictures of a life lived on my parents' dime. Every word felt like a betrayal, twisting the knife a bit deeper. They didn't see me, they saw a ticket to an easy life. That night, lying in bed next to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. "Jake, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that?" I whispered, hoping for some sign I'd misread the situation. He rolled over, facing me with those eyes that once melted my heart. "Emma, it's not about need, it's about what's smart. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take it?" The word deserve echoed in my head long after Jake had drifted off to sleep. It was clear we were on different paths with different values. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs and where we went from here. After that first clash with Jake about money and pride, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to the same page. But oh, was I wrong? Enter the in-laws, stage left, with their own special brand of chaos. Jake's folks weren't exactly the poster children for self-reliance. They had this way of sniffing out a free meal from miles away, and my family's wealth was like a beacon to them. One evening, we're all sitting around our cramped living room, and Frank's going on about this new business opportunity that just needed a small investment to get off the ground. "So, Emma darling," Carol starts, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that could give you cavities, "with your family's resources, I bet you could easily help us out. It's such a sure thing." I tried to keep my cool, really I did. "Carol, Frank, I've told you before, we're managing our finances independently. My parents' money isn't part of this equation. But Frank, he's got the persistence of a door-to-door salesman. Come on, Emma, it's not like you'd feel it. What's a few thousand to your dad? He probably spends that on golf in a weekend." The audacity floored me. Here they were, sitting in our home, eating our food, and they had the guts to treat my family's hard-earned money like it was theirs for the taking. Jake tries to play mediator. "And maybe they have a point," I stuttered, feeling utterly alone. "Right, we could help out family." I nearly choked on the word. "Jake, when did we decide it's our job to bankroll your parents' dreams?" The room went ice cold. Carol, not one to let a moment of drama go by unexploited, piped up. "Well, I never. Here we thought family helped each other out, but if you're going to be stingy." "Stingy?" I interjected sharply. "Working for what you have isn't being stingy, Carol. It's called being responsible. Maybe you should try it sometime." Frank tried to smooth things over, but the damage was done. "Look, Emma, no need to get upset. We're just talking here, right?" I couldn't hide my sarcasm. "Seems like all we ever do is talk about how my family can solve your problems." That night, after they finally left, with Jake apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a full-on invasion of our lives by two people who saw me not as a daughter-in-law but as a walking, talking ATM. After our little Lily came into this world, life took a turn I didn't quite expect. You'd think the arrival of a grandchild would bring out the best in people, right? Well, not so much with Jake's folks. They showed up at the hospital with what had to be the cheapest onesie from the discount bin. It still had the clearance sticker on it. But when my folks came through with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and some top-notch baby gear, you'd have thought World War III was about to break out in that hospital room. "Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they?" Carol quipped, eyeing the gifts with a mix of disdain and envy. "Must be nice to just throw money around." "Bet they could have just gotten you a house instead of all this fluff," Jake chimed in with a chuckle. "Yeah, Mom's got a point, Em. Your folks sure don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh?" My heart sank. Here I was holding our newborn, and all they could talk about was how my parents should have spent their money. It stung, hearing Jake echo his mom's words. Was our daughter just a dollar sign to them? I tried to keep the peace, biting back my growing anger. Well, it's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts. But Frank wasn't about to let it go. "Oh, sure. But when you think about it, a nice little investment in property, now that's a gift. That keeps on giving. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Jake tried to smooth things over, saying his parents were just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. But the seed was planted. Doubt started creeping in about why Jake really married me. Was it love, or was my family's bank account the main attraction? A few weeks later, during one of their unsolicited visits, Carol brought it up again. We were all crammed in our living room, Lily fussing in my arms, and Carol couldn't resist a jab at the new stroller my mom had bought us. Must be nice having your folks shower Lily with all these expensive toys and gadgets, though a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think, she said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive tone I'd come to dread. Jake, sitting beside his mom, nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking. Maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right? I was floored. Not only were Jake's parents relentless, but now Jake was on board with turning our daughter's birth into a bargaining chip for financial gain. Is that what this is about for you, Jake? Using my parents for money? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Jake looked taken aback, but Carol just sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are rich, it's only practical to think about these things. After they finally left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lily asleep beside me. The realization hit me hard. My marriage, my family, it all felt like a transaction to them, and I was the currency. The last few years have been a roller coaster, to say the least. Lily's grown into a fiery little 3-year-old, full of life and laughter. But life threw us some curveballs that I never saw coming. First, it was Mom. The accident was sudden, a shock to all of us. I was drowning in grief, barely keeping it together for Lily. But Jake, his first question wasn't about how I was holding up. No, it was, so, how much are you getting from your mom's will? It felt like a slap in the face. My mom wasn't even cold, and here he was, eyeing her legacy like a vulture. According to Mom's will, I inherited the barbershop chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Jake was quick to offer his expertise. Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business, he said, all confidence and smiles. I was too lost in my grief to argue, so I let him take the reins. Though I made sure the ownership papers stayed in my name. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he could turn things around for us. Then, barely a year later, Dad passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short time broke something in me. I needed Jake more than ever, but all he could talk about was what we'd inherit from Dad. The day after Dad's death, Jake's parents came over. I expected maybe a shred of decency, a moment of respect for my loss, but no. They dove straight into speculations about Dad's wealth. So, Emma, must be a hefty sum coming your way, huh? Frank said, barely able to contain his glee. I saw red. Can you not for once just stop talking about money? I shouted, the words exploding out of me like shrapnel. Carol put on her best offended face. Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude. Jake tried to play peacemaker, as always. They're just curious. It's a big deal, you know, a big deal. I echoed, my voice rising. My parents are gone, Jake, and all you and your parents can think about is cashing in. Is that all I am to you? A bank? The room fell silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked at me, then at his parents, and mumbled some half-hearted apology. But the damage was done. I couldn't stand the sight of them, their greed, their complete lack of empathy. Get out, I said, my voice steady, but cold. They left, Carol muttering under her breath, Frank with a scowl. Jake lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior, but I was done listening. 2 days after my dad died, Jake comes bouncing through the doorway earlier than usual. Babe, I've got awesome news, he beams at me, barely containing his excitement. I've struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it? My jaw nearly hit the floor. What? You did what? Without even asking me? I was fuming, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Before we could really dive into it, his folks showed up, ready to party like we'd hit the jackpot. They brought in this feast from some fancy restaurant and a bunch of bottles that screamed high roller. Carol was all smiles, waving those bottles in my face. Guess what, honey? We've sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast, Carol declared, and I stared at her, feeling like I was trapped in some bad dream. Hold on, you what? Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach with all that humidity and the winds with a kid. Are you out of your mind? Carol just waved off my concerns like I was talking about the weather. Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous. Where's this money coming from? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it, yachts, private jets, we're living the dream. Carol's eyes were practically sparkling with dollar signs. I turned to Jake, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? Babe, it makes sense. Managing both businesses will be too much. We've got to focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future, Jake said, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, the greed, the audacity, it was all too much. Show me the financials for the salon, I demanded. I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions. Jake squirmed, avoiding eye contact. Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable, he said, his parents joining the chorus, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But looking at them all I could see were vultures circling. Why the rush to sell the hairdresser shops again? I pressed, needing answers from Jake. He shrugged, the picture of faux reason. Look, babe, after your dad's gone, juggling both businesses just doesn't make sense. We've got to focus on what brings in more dough. The car oil thing is a gold mine compared to the salons. His folks perked up at this, chiming in with their 2 cents. Darling, think about it. Selling those little shops could give you a life of luxury. Why waste your time on them? His mom cooed, her voice dripping with greed. The sight of them practically salivating over my inheritance made my skin crawl. I want you to leave now, I said, my voice firm, my resolve stronger. This is a time to mourn my father, not feast on what he left behind. Jake tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. And another thing, this is my inheritance we're talking about, mine. You and your parents have no say in this. The air turned icy as they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought. With heavy steps and even heavier scowls, they left, leaving me to ponder the lonely battle ahead. The dawn after my father's funeral found me in a fog of grief, the world around me reduced to a monotonous gray. That's when Jake decided to inject his version of color back into our lives. Over a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, he launched into his agenda. We need to call a meeting with the founders of your father's company pronto, Jake stated, his voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. I paused, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth, and stared at him. Jake, my father has just been buried. Can't this wait? I need some time to process everything. He waved off my concerns with a flick of his hand. Time is money, babe. We need to act fast. Frustrated and seeking clarity, I reached out to our family lawyer, asking for a breakdown of the barber shop chain's status and a primer on my father's business dealings, information I hoped would give me some ground to stand on. A month whizzed by in a blur of legal jargon and financial statements, until Jake, accompanied by his parents, descended upon our house once more, each of them bursting with unsolicited advice and greed-laden suggestions. Without so much as a hello, Jake dove right in. You know, I've been thinking. I'm the right man to lead your dad's company." The audacity of his claim left me speechless, but he wasn't done. "And I'll need a new car, something that screams business mobile. The latest BMW should do the trick." Before I could even muster a response, Carol chimed in with her own outrageous demands. "The coastal house is nearly ready. We just need to throw in another $300,000 plus some for furniture. And, dear, I expect you to set up an account for me. I need to maintain my lifestyle, after all." After listening to their endless demands, I knew what I had to do. It was like a switch flipped inside me. No more misses. My gal clutching the divorce papers like a shield, I stepped forward, interrupting their chatter. "Jake, we need to talk," I announced, placing the papers before him on the coffee table. He picked them up, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this?" His attempt at nonchalance couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Divorce papers," I stated, every word deliberate. "I've had the business audited, Jake. You've run it into the ground. It's teetering on the edge of ruin because of your management." His face drained of color, a guilty child caught in a lie. "I was trying to make it better," he stammered, his excuses as flimsy as his confidence. "Make it better by firing our most talented staff and neglecting the core of what made the business succeed." My voice rose, fueled by a cocktail of anger and betrayal. Carol, ever the meddler, couldn't resist intervening. "Now, dear, let's remember, he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no joy in it. "Nice try, but everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room went silent. They were stunned, their grand schemes shattering around them. "And another thing," I added, staring Jake down, "you're going to pay back every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce finally hit Jake, his reaction was to desperately grovel, pleading with me to reconsider. "Please, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. His parents, not to be outdone in the drama department, launched into their own tearful performance. They lamented about sinking all their funds into the coastal house, a property now hanging by a thread. "Without the next installment, we're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, tears flowing freely. "Please, think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their previous actions, feeling nothing but a detached coldness towards their plight. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I stated, my tone unwavering with a newfound resolve. I guided them to the door, closing it and this chapter of my life behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't allow myself to dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future, selling the apartment that Jake and I once shared. The sale provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly but surely, and when they finally caught up with Jake, he was ordered to compensate for the turmoil he'd inflicted on the hairdresser chain. The courts determined that his recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him being held accountable for once felt like a bittersweet vindication for the hardship. Out of nowhere, my phone rang one day, and on the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice laced with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place." "Any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts, before responding. "You made your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. "It's time you lie in it." Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me, anger at their continued sense of entitlement, but also a profound sense of freedom from their clutches. After everything that went down with the divorce and wrestling back control over my mom's hairdresser chain, life finally started to brighten up again. It was a tough climb, but gradually, the salons began to find their old spark. Bringing back those top stylists we'd lost felt like a victory parade. Watching them walk back through those doors, ready to bring their magic back to our chairs, was like watching the place come alive again. Turns out, I was more cut out for the business world than I'd ever imagined. Each day was a new lesson, a new surprise about what I could achieve. If it hadn't been for being cornered by life's cruel twist, I might never have uncovered this side of me. Handling my dad's car oil business was another mountain to climb. For now, I decided to bring in a manager to steer the ship while I got my bearings. "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," I told him, making it clear I was still in charge. Once Lily's old enough, maybe around 20, I'm thinking of passing it to her. I want her to have options, to choose her path. Meanwhile, I'm dipping my toes into it, learning the ropes. Our new home, just me and Lily, was a haven of peace, a world away from the turmoil we'd left behind. It was small, sure, but it was ours, a place where we could grow, heal, and build something new. Every corner filled with laughter, every nook cradling a memory we were making together. Out in the garden, Lily's laughter was a balm to my soul. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she'd say, her eyes alight with wonder and admiration. "You're going to be even more amazing," I'd respond, pulling her into a hug. I knew deep down that we were on the brink of something wonderful together. We were unstoppable, ready to meet whatever the future held with open arms and hope.